How about we start from the start line? The start line, I thought, was, as the night went on, it just got worse and worse and worse. I don't really want to do this. And that was probably the closest I was to DNFing.
How you feeling?
Ready.
Oh yeah.
The start line, I thought, was, when I've seen videos in the past, I just thought it was all the runners squeezed into that little area between the start line and the church. Because in my race in the UTMB, there was over 2,700 runners that started it. And I've seen footage for years of all of them just crammed into this space just in front of the church. And I assumed it was just the runners. But what actually is the truth is it's just a free-for-all in there. Anyone can stand in there. So for example, standing directly in front of me, there was grandparents with their grandkids, and one of them, they were sitting on their shoulders. So it was like a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And they were just amongst all the runners. 3, 2, 1, go, when the start line hit, you had 2,700 runners surging for the start line. And then there was just all these spectators just standing completely still. And there was little kids, there was babies, there was all sorts of stuff. And it just was not monitored. Just anyone could stand anywhere in there on the start line. There was some upsides to it. There was this one guy standing in front of me, and when I was filming, he would have looked over his shoulder and looked at his wife, who was holding his little baby, 50 times. It was really heartwarming to watch him sort of look over his shoulder. He would give a smile, he'd blow a kiss, and he just kept doing it. So that was a really beautiful side to it. But the downside to it was, when you're running and you're getting pushed in this crowd, to have to dodge little kids and dodge spectators, old women, like there was just everyone in there. It was a little bit dangerous, that side of it. But then the upside to it was I got to see this really beautiful part of this guy looking back at his wife, and like he actually made me really emotional because he just could not stop himself looking back and looking at his kid and wife and blowing them kisses, and that was really sweet. So from where I was standing, which was like back from the start line and to sort of the left-hand side, it took me about 2 minutes to walk across the start line, just with the amount of people. And then I've played sport my entire life, and I've always wanted to be in like a grand final of, you know, whatever sport it was, the world championships. And the crowd running through Chamonix made you feel like you were the best ultra runner in the world. Like it was 10 or 20 people deep, it felt like, on each side. There was cowbells going, there was flags being waved, everyone was screaming. It was electric, just the energy running through town. And I thought that was gonna last maybe 2 minutes, but the first 10 minutes, which is like 2 kilometers of running, the street was just lined with people screaming. It was just exciting, like the adrenaline surge and the smile on my face. And it was, you really did feel like the main character of a movie. So once you finish going through town and you hit your first trail, the trail was like a fire trail. It was really wide. You probably could have 6 or 7 people wide, but 2,700 people all starting at the same time, hitting this fire trail. You'd back down to a walk, sometimes a standstill, and it is, as far as you can see forward, it is just packed, jam-packed with people. And then you turn around, and as far as you can see behind you, it's just jam-packed with people, and you just see the head bobs. You had people sort of hustling for position there, you know, like putting their elbows out, they're trying to get in front. And I sort of just felt like a sardine that was just getting pushed along with the pack. You cannot choose how fast you run that first section. You are limited by who's pushing you behind, who's in front of you. you have no control of that first fire trail. And then you sort of start to break up a little bit. You start to go up to a climb. And the first climb that we had, I consider it a climb. It wasn't a climb in the grand scheme of things, but the first hill that we went up to, there was a staircase and it just got so jam-packed that it was a standstill on the staircase. And this guy, about 10 people in front of me, just looked over at someone else and they sort of pointed down the hill a little bit and just went like this, as in like, just go around. So he walked off and I walked behind him and we walked up this grass hill through someone's backyard and up onto the track. And then the hundreds of people that were stuck on this staircase started booing, like they're going boo, and they're all yelling in French and they're all like waving their fists at us because we got to get up and ahead of them. And then where the staircase met and where we came around, you sort of intersect with the people and there was like this real nasty energy because they knew that we went around the blockage and they had to stand still for probably 5-6 minutes it would have taken to get up a staircase that was maybe 100 meters long, and we just sort of went around. So yeah, that was like the first bit of angst that I felt, or like rivalry out there. A lot of the French guys that were stuck in that line were not happy that we went out and around the line. There's a track obviously, but when you're out there, there's multiple ways to get to the same spot. You know, like you can see people, not everyone walks on the same line. So yeah, this sort of was just a little deviation around a blockage on the course. Saint-Gervais was awesome. I've never ever seen a sporting event like that. Energy was electric, like it was wild. Coming into Le Contamine is the first crew station. This was one of my low points in the races for sure. We're about 30K in. It had not let up yet. Like I was just surrounded by runners. And when I say surrounded, it was like sardines. I had done my first ascent and descent, and I had noticed that my ankle wasn't great on the downhills, which I knew going in, but I was sort of hoping on the day adrenaline and stuff would kick in. Going into the checkpoint, there was thousands of people in there. So obviously you've got all the runners, but then you've got all their crew, and it is just packed. Like you can't sit down anywhere. If you put something down, someone will like move it out of the way.
I do remember that this checkpoint was the worst, and I feel like the climbs you're going to have now is going to really scatter people.
Yeah, I've got a big climb now, don't I?
Yeah.
I think I remember saying to you, like, this race is cool, the energy's cool, but I don't like it. I was like, I don't like this. It's too many people, and my ankle was hurting, and I had got a taste of the terrain, and that was probably the closest I was to DNFing, was at the 30K mark, because I was like, I don't really want to do this. My leg's already in pain. I've got another 147K of this insane terrain. And yeah, I had some pretty negative self-talk in that crew point. That was not a nice part of the race, 30K in. Some of the things that went through my head there, like to make sure I stood up and kept going, was I knew that checkpoint was going to be the worst, because it was the most congested. So the most people, we had the least amount of time to spread out. And everyone, all the crew were frantic too, because they didn't actually know the process. So for a lot of them, it's their first time figuring out how to get in with their ticket, and that they can't get in 10 minutes prior, and all these rules around the crew. So I knew that was going to be the worst point. There's highs and lows in ultra running from the events that I've done in the past, and I was just hoping I was in a low. I'd never started in such a low though. 30K in, wanting to quit, was a pretty scary point. But I was saying to myself, I've put a lot of effort into doing this, and if I pulled out now, there would be a lot of unknowns. I wouldn't know if my leg would have come good. I wouldn't know if I could have finished it under the time cap. There would have been so many unknowns that I didn't want to leave that loop open. I wanted to close that loop. Telling myself, you haven't answered your questions yet. After I left Le Contamine, I had roughly 55 kilometers before I could see or have crew assistance again. And we worked out that was going to take me around the 12-hour mark. So that's all the way to Courmayeur, which is in Italy. In my head, I had decided that I was going to split this up into two completely separate races, which was Chamonix to Courmayeur was race 1, and Courmayeur to Chamonix was race 2. Le Contamine was the last crew assistance that I got until what I dubbed in my head the first finish line, which was Courmayeur. And that's when you got to see the crew again. It was roughly 55 kilometers, and I knew that was gonna, well, we guesstimated about 12 hours worth of work for me, which it worked out to almost the minute. That's a big chunk of time to not have crew assistance, and also running through the first night as well. First night went really well actually, because I realized that I could climb pain-free, and that the time that people were making up on the descents, people were flying past me on the descents. And because we were quite early in the race, they were cooking their legs. So then by the time we got to the flat, they weren't really running that much, and they couldn't climb very well. Whereas because of my ankle, I had to walk down every descent. So then whenever anything became flat, I was able to run, and then I was really strong on the climbs. And then I was realizing, oh, I'm back with these same people again, the ones that flew past me on the downhill. I can keep up with them. Maybe I can get this done. That was starting to give me confidence as well. That first night went really well. I got a little bit tired. Been awake now for 24 hours. Got at least another 24. Starting to feel really tired. But that's when it really started to sink in. Oh, this is night 1 of 2 and I'm already pretty tired. So I was sort of in and out of the checkpoints fairly quickly. And my goal was to get to Courmayeur, finish that first race. I knew I had a few things waiting for me at Courmayeur, which was a new pair of socks, new pair of underwear, shorts, shirt. I had my daytime running hat, obviously my wife Tash waiting there. I was gonna sort of refresh and then take on part 2, like race number 2. Unfortunately, I'm sort of struggling to film. This has taken like every bit of willpower and determination I've got just to get this race done. Coming into Courmayeur, you come down quite a decent descent, which I had walked down, and then I had my refresh, and then leaving Courmayeur and going into Switzerland. So leaving Italy into Switzerland, the climbs got very serious. It was really steep. It's quite a hot part of the day as well. The climbs, and not just one in particular, but all of the climbs came down to who was around you. This is my personal opinion. A couple times we got in this track of, I remember there was like 6 or 7 of us. We're all in our 30s, all guys. And I was literally staring down at this guy's Asics who was in front of me. I have no idea who he is. And I was just putting my foot where his foot was going. He was doing the same thing in front of him. He was doing the same thing to the person in front of him. And we were just marching down these people on this climb. None of us spoke a word for maybe 2 or 3 hours. It was just head down, one after the other. And we were just eating people up going up this climb. It was like when you're riding a bike and you're in someone's slipstream. We just had that going with us. And then we were marching up. But then on some of the other climbs, if maybe you've caught up some people that have gone out too hard, it's single file. It's really hard to overtake people. So you get stuck behind people and you're walking slower than what you want to, and you just can't get away around them. I told this story to some other people, but it was quite early on in the race. I realized when I got overtaken, these French guys were coming up and they were putting their shoulder pretty much on the back of my shoulder. And then they were taking their poles and they were doing a double pole across my legs to sort of stop me. And then they would push themselves around and get in front. And I was like, oh, okay, that's sort of what you do. So then I just started doing that. When I was going up hills, I would get both my poles when there was someone in front of me slower than me, and I would reach around, I'd put both my poles in front of their legs, and it would sort of stop them, and then I would push off both my poles and go around them on the rocks or like up on the bank. And I did that all race. And then at the end, I spoke to some people. I was like, oh yeah, like when we got stuck in those things, I was just doing the double pole. And they're like, what do you mean the double? I was like, oh, I just like put it across their legs, and heaps of people did it. And they're like, no one did that to us. So I think I just got a couple really rude French people to do it to me at the start. And I was like, oh, this must just what they do. And then I did it to everyone from then on. So I apologize to everyone that I did that to, because it was a bit rude. Because the first few times it happened to me, I was like, what is going on? But then I just thought it was the norm. That was a funny story, I remember. Coming down Col Ferret into La Folie was a really hard descent, I remember. And I got overtaken by so many people. I was so slow there, it felt like. And this was when a bit of doubt crept in on the time caps, because I felt like I was moving so slow on the downhills that there was no way that I was gonna stay ahead of the time cap. And this is when I started to be fueled by a bit of fear and doubt. And I remember saying to you every time I saw you, am I in front of the cutoff? Am I in front of the cutoff? Am I in front of that? It's all I could think about. And I couldn't do the maths in my head on whether I was staying in front of the cutoff or where I was falling behind. Turns out I was like 4 hours in front of the cutoff, but for whatever reason, just fatigue and fear, in my head, I was like, I'm gonna get cut off, I'm gonna get cut off. And I remember you just saying to me, you're fine, you've got time, like don't stress. That climb out of La Folie would be forever ingrained in my head, because this was going into the second night now. And this is when I started to hallucinate. And I've had this in my 100 miler that I've done before. I've hallucinated before. And it's always been like quite jovial. Like I've seen things and I've realized that they're not real, and it's just that I'm tired and sleep deprived. So the first few hallucinations I got, I was like, oh, I've been here before, this is okay. And then as the night went on, it just got worse and worse and worse. And I think because I was in a state of fear, I suppose, about getting time capped or something going wrong in this race, or because this race meant so much to me, my hallucinations sort of mirrored that, and they started to get really dark and horrible. I saw piles of dead bodies on that ended up just being logs and trees that had fallen. I saw 2 decapitated women's heads sitting there. And then I remember seeing lots of masks that are like the Slipknot, like the really scary mask with nails coming out of them. I just kept telling myself, it's not real, it's okay, it's okay. But then I just completely lost control of it, and I started hearing things, and then I started seeing things coming out of the bush at me as well. And I was like, okay, I'm in a really bad way here. This is not something I can keep going through. I ended up finding a park bench somewhere in Switzerland, and I pulled my phone out. I was like, all right, I just need to sleep. I need sleep. But I was so scared that if I fell asleep, I'd sleep for 6 hours. So I called you and I said, I'm hallucinating. It's not good. Call me back in 15 minutes. So what I ended up doing is taking my pack off, climbing under the park bench and putting the pack under my head, laying there. And then I just laid my phone flat on my face like this, because I knew that when you called, it was gonna wake me up, so I didn't sleep through. I just laid there with my eyes closed, and I could not fall asleep because I could just hear things, and I was scared I was gonna sleep through. I was scared that maybe I'd lose reception and you couldn't call me. I don't know how long it was. I think we worked it out that it was maybe 7 or 8 minutes later. I got up, put my head torch on, started walking down the track, and all the hallucinations were gone. Just needed to sit down, take a breath, close my eyes. Sure enough, you called me, which had been 15 minutes, and you're like, are you okay? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm just walking, I'm back on track. I'm all good. Sorry about that, never mind, don't worry about it. And obviously you were really worried because when I called you, I was in a state. I think over the entire race, I reckon I would have had hundreds of hallucinations, and virtually every single one of them was very dark, ominous, scary hallucinations. This is a bit of advice for anyone that's doing this in the future. Champex-Lac is an aid station at the top of a climb. You can hear this aid station forever. We thought we were 5 minutes away for probably 2 hours. This part is where I found out that the Europeans just fart with no shame. It was wild how much farting was going on. I think because we're in our second night, you've got a bunch of runners on synthetic stuff, but you're single file climbing, so their ass is right in front of your face, and they would just let a fart off. No, they wouldn't step to the side, nothing like that. No one says anything, but it was just like a chain of toots going up this to Champex-Lac. And I remember just thinking, this is disgusting how many people are farting. And then you just sort of give up. Like, I remember there was people behind me and you're head down marching, and I needed to fart, and I was just farting in people's faces. You just After all the hallucinations and trying to fall asleep under the park bench, I was coming into a crew assisted, which is Champex-Lac, and that's when I was like, I'm gonna have my first proper sleep. Just lay there and rested. I didn't actually fall asleep at this one. I was aware of everything going on around me. Like, I actually heard you speak to someone and saying, oh, he's seeing things. And I remember laying there going, I hope to God that isn't a medic or someone involved in the race, because I don't want them to think that I'm not able to keep going. So then I was like thinking, all right, when I get up, make sure like I'm full of energy, and just in case they're watching me or anything like that. Yeah, so once I left Champex-Lac, I was off to Trient, and there was a pretty steep climb, but this was a lot more descending, which was not good for me in any way, shape or form. So this was a really, really long descent, and it was super technical. Like, I've never seen tree roots intertwined like that. I couldn't imagine doing UTMB in the wet. Like, if you were to stand on a tree root, you would just slip. Thank God we didn't have any rain this year. We just had the heat, which I was okay with. So I remember coming down into Trient and just thinking to myself, I have to sleep. Like, since I woke up last, which was Friday morning, it'd probably been 40 hours since I had slept yet. This was the first thing I said to Tash when I saw her was, did you bring a pillow?
Sorry?
Did you bring a pillow?
Yeah, of course I did.
Because I was like determined I was gonna sleep. I laid down, Tash set a timer for 15 minutes. And then I remember she sort of taps me on the shoulder, rubs me on the shoulder. And I remember opening my eyes and going, I actually slept. I was asleep, but I reckon I got a good 8 to 10 minutes of sleep there, and it changed my life. I felt amazing after that. So Trient to Vallorcine was a section of the race that I do not remember at all. This part of the race, I reckon I fell asleep while running or hiking like 20 times. The sleep deprivation for me was terrible. Like, it obviously led to all my hallucinations, but I could not keep my eyes open. At this point, no matter how much caffeine I was taking, it was just like I was in too much of a hole. I was walking and I just came to a complete stop, and I was startled, and I thought to myself, I have no idea where I am. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I have no idea what I've just done for the last hour. Like, I stopped and I thought to myself, what am I doing? Where am I? Like, I was on the course, there was people around me, but I just completely blacked it out, or like gone into autopilot. And I remember thinking, oh shit, I don't know what I've just done. Have I been standing still? Have I been moving? Am I okay? Did I fall asleep? And I remember looking down at my watch, really out of it. I could not do the maths at all.
John, I don't know. Sometimes to me.
So coming into Vallorcine was the end of the second night, which means the sun was rising. And whenever the sun rises, it boosts your mood by 100%. And I knew I was finishing that day. It was like, okay, the sun's up. I'm about to finish at some stage here. I remember sitting down at Vallorcine, and my feet were, in the last 10K up to Vallorcine, my feet had just given up. That was like the breaking point. All the skin started to fall off, like my heels and my toe. The tape had started to sort of push back on itself, but I knew I had only got 18 kilometers left. And something that I remember was in my training run, running from Vallorcine to Chamonix, the finish line, I remember thinking, you know what? It's really not that bad of a run. Like, the climbs are bad, but they're okay, they're doable. not thinking that I had done it completely fresh, full of excitement, big smile on my face, completely naive when I did that race. That last 18K was so brutal because I hadn't really factored in that I'd been awake for 2 nights, that I've got 160K in my legs already. My feet had fallen apart. So word of warning to anyone that does any course rec, I don't think it helped me at all. It gave me the biggest false sense of confidence. And then when it actually got on that part of the course, it was brutal. It was so difficult.
What a day to finish UTMB! Ah!
Coming into Chamonix, into town, you cross over these steel staircase. And I'd seen this in a bunch of YouTube videos. And for anyone that's gonna do it in the future, that steel staircase is like a sign from God, because you know, after that steel staircase, it's flat. There's a massive crowd. All your friends and your loved ones are right there in town, and you've got a couple K to finish. Coming over that staircase, I remember I started running and I heard, "Let's go, shorty!" And being in France and not other than Tash with me, and I was a bit shocked, and I looked over and there was a friend of mine, Morgan Pilley, who I hadn't seen in about 20 years. It turns out he's a professional runner now. He runs for La Sportiva. And he had come out just to see me finish. And like, he'd put his hand out, and I remember just grabbing his hand. He ran with me for a bit, and he's just like, "Dude, I'm so proud of you, well done." And like, he didn't need to come out to see me finish. And, you know, I'm a back of a packer, and he's, you know, a very established runner, sponsored runner. So for him to come out, he was the first person that I saw. And I sort of held it together with him a little bit because I was like, haven't seen this guy in a while. It'd be pretty weird if I just cried on his shoulder the whole time. So I was just like, "Oh, thanks, bro. Feeling pretty good." And then he's like, he ran down the lane. He's like, "All right, mate, enjoy the finish line." And he peeled off. And then after that, I think I just started bawling my eyes out. I was crying. I was like, "Oh, that was so nice of Morgan." I would love to see his opinion. I was probably already crying my eyes out when I gave him the high five. And then there's just people either side line just screaming. There's kids putting their hands out for high fives. Like, that whole run from the steel staircase all the way through town. And then when you finally go around into sport, you turn the corner and you see the finish line. There's hundreds of people. The church is in the background. You look up and the mountain in the background. It was almost hard to believe that I was there. I have watched that finish line hundreds of times over the last 18 months. And then I remember turning the corner and going, shit, like I'm actually on the UTMB finish line. It was a really, really odd feeling. I remember crossing the finish line and you just screaming.
Yeah!
Your voice just screaming. I remember putting my head in my hands like this and then looking up and just like, "You've done it, you can relax." I sort of got hit with another surge of adrenaline. All the pain dissipated. I was just like smiling from ear to ear. I remember I did my dance to the camera, and then it just was over. I remember going and getting my finishing vest and just saying to you, I need to get out of here. Like, it was as quick as that high hit me, it was back to reality. And like, I need to get out of the crowd. I need to get out and like rest. That night, I think I slept for about 12 hours. Woke up the next day, felt brilliant. Monday night, my body just gave up. I broke out in a big rash. All my joints swelled up. I was like flu type symptoms. My feet were obviously in agony. It was this weird thing of like, I came good for a day, and then the second day it all hit me and I was a mess. I was really, really, really bad. I think one of the best things about being in Chamonix for a period of time was just all the people that we met. Like, we were lucky enough to meet Jeff Pelletier, we met Billy Yang, I met John McAvoy, Aidan, the Irish physio. We had Johnny, we had Marco, the two photographers at the refuge. It felt like when we were in Chamonix that we had a family there. That was really, really nice meeting all those people. I would never do UTMB again. It's not my style of race. I think I heard Billy Yang say many years ago that he would prefer to do TMB at his own pace and stay in the refuge than he would run that course with 2,700 people, and I agree with him. I would never do that race again. What's next for me is I have now run an ultramarathon on 4 out of the 7 continents. I would love to get to 7 out of 7 continents. Immediately for me, I would love to do something alongside my brother and my dad, but I'm gonna leave that up to them. And I think the next immediate thing for me is to crew my wife in her first 100-kilometer run.